for you. Hello everyone, it's RedShark Live, and my name's David Shapton. I'm the editor of RedShark News. Let me just explain what it is you're watching at the moment. We're going to run a bi-weekly series of live shows just to bring you information about what we've been talking about in the publication www.redsharknews.com over the last week or two. All the best bits, we're going to have to talk about them, we're going to have guests, and it's going to be great fun. We're enjoying the fact that here in England it's pretending to be almost like summer. We've actually got the doors open, and just to prove that it's live, somebody's actually flying a drone just out there, outside. They nearly crashed it into a tree just now, so if you hear some strange noises, it's all live, folks. Anyway, most importantly, I want to say thank you so much to our sponsors, Matrox, great company based in Montreal. They've been around for a long time, started out making very, very early graphics cards in the late 70s, and then in the 90s went through their famous Matrox Millennium series, and then started building amazing editing systems called DigiSuites. And now they make less visible but incredibly important stuff that you don't necessarily see. But I've got an example here. This is how we're streaming this. This is actually a Matrox Monarch. This is the smaller version. This is the HD, which can encode one stream or record one stream of very high quality H.264. Over there on our control desk, we've got a Matrox Monarch HDX, which is has two encoders in it, and that will allow you, for example, to stream to two streaming delivery networks like Facebook or YouTube, or you can stream to one and record the other at the same time. It's incredibly versatile, very well made, and we've been really punishing it for the last week while we've been testing it. Haven't turned it off once, and it's been absolutely rock solid. So the advantage of this way of streaming is that you have a nice compact self-contained unit that doesn't you don't need a computer to do your streaming, basically. So we all know what it's like when you have to do something critical with a computer. It may work, or you may get an update and that'll stop it all working. With a dedicated box, it's very deterministic, it's very reliable. So if you're going to stream an event like this, it makes an awful lot of sense to do it like that. So thanks again to Matrox, really appreciate it. We're going to come back to Matrox at the end of the show, say thank you again. Meanwhile, we're going to get into the meat of the show. When was it? 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago? NAB. I've got Lewis from Atomos with me. We're going to talk about one of the most surprising things that happened at NAB. I think it took most people by surprise, didn't it? Which is the idea of ProRes Raw, and we're all familiar with what ProRes is. It's a very high quality codec. I think they call it a mezzanine codec, don't they? It's kind of, it's not a very, very low bitrate codec for delivering video. It's a high quality, production quality codec that is very robust. But if it does have a drawback, it's that it has baked in color values. Wouldn't it be nice if you could have a sort of equivalent for ProRes that actually worked with raw video? And well, guess what?
Yeah, and it's been the culmination of a few years' work, and what it's allowing us to do is deliver the flexibility of raw, but in the performance and convenience of ProRes. You know, something that we've all become quite used to working with since Apple brought it to market. And what Apple have done is they've they've worked to harness and leverage all the aspects of compute that they have. So the fabric of their new iMac Pro or their existing line of Macs, OS X, and then Final Cut Pro 10 running on that.
They're what people call vertically integrated. They make everything from the low-level hardware to the high-level software.
Yeah, and you've got the control of all of the aspects that's going on in there, which is critical when you're bringing new technology to market. So utilising Final Cut Pro 10 and the updates that's had in 10.4.1 and the recording that we've brought in, the update of Atomos 9 allows you to record in ProRes Raw from a range of cameras. So cameras we've been working with for quite some time, from Sony, from Panasonic, and from Canon. So
just in brackets here, what Atomos products support ProRes Raw?
So ProRes Raw is available on Shogun Inferno and Sumo 19. So these have been receiving these are 4K 60 products, and the ones with the higher horsepower to be able to handle the recording of ProRes Raw. So ProRes Raw offers some real efficiencies as well as benefits in post, and it's pretty prevalent for HDR production because we're moving to higher color resolutions and bit depths to be able to deliver the increased contrast and color fidelity that HDR delivers. So this is a way that allows us to gain more information from cameras, that allows us to produce better high dynamic range, but whilst keeping the bit depth lower and keeping efficiency in post.
So you mentioned HDR, high dynamic range. How does ProRes Raw help with high dynamic range?
So as I said, it's really an efficiency advantage as well as a color fidelity and grading advantage of having a Bayer pattern rather than RGB values already decided.
So the
in the
Bayer
camera.
pattern is because sensors are black and white, aren't they? So the Bayer pattern is the pattern of red, blues and greens that allow mathematics to, if you like, infer a colour picture from that.
Yeah, and that's something with that the camera engineering at each of the camera manufacturers works on, and then we take a feed output from them. So our product is separate from the camera, and we take the feed in, and we're able to capture that into ProRes Raw or ProRes, depending on what you need. But for HDR, the reason it's a benefit is for some cameras that they can't record 12-bit internally, but they can output their RAW as 12 bits, or they can output higher resolution, so 4K 60. They can output higher frame rates like 2K 240. So it's an enabler to get more creative, but it means you've got more that you can work with in post. The decisions that are being made within there, if you've got a much thicker negative of information that you've taken from the camera, there's more decisions that you can make in post around colour.
All right, that's fascinating, fantastic. I just want to stop you there because I forgot to say at the beginning that we'd love to get some questions from everybody. So if you're watching this, want to ask a question, just send a tweet with the hashtag RedSharkLive. Or you can ask questions directly on the RedShark Live player. So the other thing is, I'm going to keep saying this, please share this. If you are watching this, just share it to your social media contacts. That would be great. And so back to Lewis. So we've got the idea that it's if you like, it's a bigger container. You get more information in it, and of course that's exactly what you want for HDR, where you want a bigger dynamic range and a bigger color gamut.
Yeah, and it allows you to make more decisions. So the more data you require, the more flexibility that you can have. If we acquire in 709, for example, we've already made colour and luminance limitations on the capture.
You're working within a narrow window of dynamic range.
And you're filming for the delivery output rather than what the camera and the scene are reflecting. So in terms of that, you have the ability to have better, cleaner standard dynamic range as well as HDR deliverables, both in PQ or HLG, depending on your destination. And ProRes Raw is a quality target based rather than a data rate target. So what this means is if you're shooting a cleaner image with less noise, then it's got a flexible
it's a variable bit rate.
Variable bit rate, so that you can get more efficiency. So, and you can, once we've got the ProRes Raw, you can transform different flavors of ProRes out of it. You know, you could take a ProRes 444 12-bit out of it if you wanted to utilize that, or you could take a 422, or however you want. You've got the decisions because you've got all of the information that you can work with out of that.
Okay, and this is, it's consistent with something that Atomos has been doing for a long time, isn't it? You know, one of the first companies to bring affordable HDR recorders, and this is really very complementary to that, isn't it?
Well, it's a facilitator for allowing people to do more, and you know, we're always about enabling people to have more flexibility with the technologies that they have, and as we're coming into higher data rates, higher bit depths that's required for these deliverables, we needed to have a more efficient codec.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And actually, just my thoughts about HDR in a very simplistic way, which is that when you look at color grading, before we had HDR delivery to HDR TVs, what the color graders were doing effectively was taking a very wide dynamic range from the camera and making it narrower.
Yeah, you're taking the stick and negative and you're really trimming it down to fit into what was a traditional broadcast standard target. 709
is what, 6.5, 7?
Yeah, it's about
arguably.
Yeah, and all these cameras are natively high dynamic range.
So in a sense, you can look at HDR as being widening that window for delivery, and therefore creative decisions have that much space as opposed to that much space to work in.
It's much easier to deliver the scene in the way the human eye saw it, because we have a wider dynamic range than 6 stops at one time of what we can see. So in terms of the decisions that you're making, actually in post it's easier to make some of those decisions. What you have to deal with is slightly different things. So because I can see more detail in the highlights, how does that work with the narrative of the story, and how can I use this increased dynamic range to enhance what we're trying to do?
So it's not just one of those marketing terms, is it? It's not just widen your creativity. It is a genuine widening of the palette of creative decisions.
It's get closer to what you're actually shot and how you can reflect that back. And we now have the ability to deliver that on YouTube, on other content delivery networks. You know, the new mobile devices that are coming out are higher output brightness in nits values, but also a wider color gamut. So that's an important thing to...
Exactly. Well, look, stick around, because I just want to talk about a couple of other things here. At NAB, RedShark presents a number of awards, and I'm not going to go through all of them because they're all very well deserved, but we don't have a lot of time here. We're trying to keep this to sort of between 20 minutes and half an hour. We can easily get carried away. But I just wanted to mention some really outstanding things. Without doubt, the absolute star of the show, in terms of the amount of traffic it brought to our site, was the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, and this just came out of the blue again, like ProRes Raw. We just turned up at 2 days before the show started, and we saw some guys on a ladder putting up a poster with a kind of teaser picture of this Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K, and when we had a little press preview uniquely to RedShark, and it really is a thing. It really is a quite amazing thing, and there are unconfirmed but fairly solid rumours that it uses the same sensor as the Panasonic GH5. Very interesting, and it has professional audio. It has USB-C output for connecting anything you like, including an SSD. So pretty amazing. The price is astonishing. The other thing about Blackmagic, not to give them all the glory here, but they do deserve quite a bit, is that they've updated Resolve, and Resolve now has Fusion built into it. So I mean, honestly, it's an absolute megalith of a product, And they haven't just thrown everything together and designed a superficial user interface to connect them. They've integrated it deeply. So, for example, you design a lower thirds in one part of it, it'll show up in Fusion as a node diagram. So, full marks to them for that. Just want to mention Canon with their full frame camera, the camera whose name looks like a hexadecimal memory address, the EOS-C700FF. FF stands for full frame. By all accounts, it's a fantastic camera, and it's right up there in the upper echelons of cinema cameras. So we're going to see that used on all the high-end productions. People have said it's really expensive. Actually, it's not expensive if you look at the company it's going to keep. Sony, as usual, had 87 products or more on show, but the one we gave an award to was their 8K LED. Did you see that?
Yeah, the micro LED wall. That's really an interesting take on screen technology, and again, HDR compatible. So it's just showing more emergent technologies around that to deliver this content.
And the reason it's so good is because they run really tiny LEDs with a surprisingly large amount of black around them, and that gives you the sort of incredible depths of the blacks and the incredible highlights, because you're looking directly at little LEDs.
I think it's got a little micro lens on there as well, so it's almost the reversal of how a sensor works. Reflecting that back out in that way.
But I don't think I've ever seen such a universal acclaim for a new product. I mean, 8K in any form is astonishing, but I mean, to see it the size of a wall. Yeah,
it's tile based, so scalable. Again.
Yeah, and I think that is the future of screens, to be honest. We're not going to be talking about, how do you get a screen that's 30 foot by 25 foot? You build it.
I think if you think of where we were talking about 709 in a deliverable container,
yes,
they were defined standards. TV sizes were. Yeah. But now we watch it engage on, small screens and big screens. So why can't you have the screen to deliver for the size that you want?
We're so far beyond that. I just want to mention Adobe. We gave an award for their Sensei artificial intelligence, and it's their ability to match the look of a clip or a whole production to another clip. Let's say, you take a picture of a painting, a famous oil painting, and you want your production to look like that. So take a picture of it, show it to this Sensei technology, and it will apply that look intelligently. And we talked to the developers who did this, and they were blown away that they got the award. And I said, well, they got the award because we were blown away with how clever they were. Final one I'm going to mention from NAB was Sharp and Red cameras. Actually, Red, as we all know, they're not officially at NAB anymore, but that doesn't stop them having about 5 or 6 rooms away from the main hall. And in there we saw some footage from a Red 8K camera. I can't remember if it was a Helium or a Monstro, but on a, I think, 70-inch Sharp 8K screen. And it was quite weird because the pictures were so good that even though they were moving, my brain was telling me they're a still picture.
Yeah.
In other words, it's like I almost felt a bit queasy because it was like, oh, hang on, still pictures don't normally move, but it is a still picture, but it isn't a still picture. And there was this kind of cognitive dissonance, and I found that absolutely fascinating. And we couldn't give Red an award because they weren't officially at the show. We would have broken our own rules. So we gave it to Sharp, and they well deserved for pushing forward 8K technology. And whenever we mention 8K in RedShark, there's a huge controversy, and hey, everybody's right, nobody's wrong. Just treat it the way you like. So finally, we are coming up to time, and I just want to mention that just for people in the UK or anyone who can get to London around the 12th or 13th of June, is that right, Nicole? 12th or 13th of June for, yes it is, for the Media Production Show in London. And it's a great show, not least because I will be hosting a discussion on, modestly, on so-called digital disruptors. So in other words, what are the technologies that have the power to be disruptive? And I just wondered if anyone watching can have a think about this, because it's not just down to me. I want to see what everybody thinks. The ones I've thought of so far, the 5 digital disruptors, are, first of all, exponential technology, the idea that technology keeps doubling in capability every 2 years. It's a bit like Moore's law, but it isn't Moore's law because it's beyond chips. Second thing is what I call the Netflix effect, and that is changing the way we're able to watch video, and it's also changing the way that people produce video, because people have to be more efficient now with video. And
there's more demands around. They've got a quite constant requirement for unique and self-produced content in the way the BBC used to have.
Exactly. So interestingly, with all respect to people at the BBC, this has kind of taken over as the threshold to get over. Third, rather technical sounding thing, field programmable gate arrays, FPGAs. They're the amazing chips that you find inside Atomos, you find inside a lot of video equipment. What it means basically is an FPGA is a device that can run software at hardware speeds. So instead of having to run software on a general purpose processor, these processors redesign themselves when they boot up to form a hardware algorithm which you can run maybe 100 times faster than you could in software. And the reason they're going to be so disruptive is because, for example, Intel has recently bought one of the big FPGA companies. I think it was Xilinx. Well, that can't happen without it having a big effect. And so we're going to suddenly, just when everybody's saying, oh, Moore's law is fading out, well, actually FPGAs, well, that's going to make things go 100 times faster, perhaps. I don't know. Number 4, AI and ML, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Almost don't have to say anything about this. It's going to be, when we finally get it in our iPhones. So wait a minute, we have got it in our iPhones.
Yeah, we were talking about this just the other day about how it's a really a technology that's already out there harvesting information and data that can speed up production and particularly post-production. Massively. When we're seeing it, as you say, you're seeing it in phones, you're seeing it in your pocket now, and there's often things that you're looking at that you're not aware of, that you're interfacing with AI and ML.
Yeah, exactly. So 5G, that's the final one. We're running a bit over time, but well, I'm enjoying this, so we'll go on for a bit longer. 5G. I mean, simply potentially gigabit speeds over mobile phones everywhere.
Yeah. Wow. Certainly great for higher resolution and higher dynamic range streaming. It's and we all interface so much now, and it's the reliance on Wi-Fi or wireless data that we take for granted now massively.
It may sound ridiculous having 8K on your phone wirelessly, but if you do that and have another one there, you're into VR, and you certainly need 8K for that. Brilliant. Okay, we've got some questions rolling in. Haven't got time for many, but let's just take a look at this. In future, will ProRes Raw work with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K? Who knows? Really,
it's an Apple-based technology.
We need Grant Petty sat here to answer that, and I think probably even he doesn't know at this stage. Too early, but yeah, it would be great. Okay, what's the main trend we saw at NAB this year? Well, main trend, I would say, was depends what you mean by main, but I think probably machine learning and AI.
And connectivity. The most impressive things that I saw were when I finally got off stand, that I thought, oh, this is a future technology that's coming. AI, the connectivity stuff, there's some really interesting things happening around that. We now have the bandwidth to make.
Well, exactly. This is why 5G is going to be so important. People say, well, we're never going to be able to deliver 8K to the home. Hang on, you can be able to do it over your mobile phone. Yeah. You only need 80 megabits per second for very good looking 8K. And, well, if you've got 1,000 megabits per second. That's easy, isn't it?
And we're talking about data rates locally as well for direct attached storage. We saw a lot of fast SSD and NVMe based drives.
Yeah.
And also for NAS as well. So collaborative working from the likes of LumaForge, and it's how we move data around, and both in the edit and from camera.
So yeah, interesting question, but you can't really isolate one trend without bringing some others in. Okay, what's our current lighting setup? Well, I'd like to say we spent 50,000 quid on some really expensive lights. Well, we actually went down to the local hardware store and got some builder's lights, and
we got some nice diffusion. And
we got some greaseproof paper, which we hung over the front. They don't get hot, so it's perfectly safe to do that. And we got the sun, of course.
We've got a bit of ambient coming.
A bit of ambient light, but you know what? As long as you understand the restrictions, which is that you have no control over them whatsoever, and the tripods are annoying. Just remember that they're builders' lights that are supposed to be, kind of illuminating cement mixers in the evening. They're astonishingly good, and basically, if you get enough of them, I think maybe we've had a little bit of colour balance issues between the cameras. But bear in mind, we're trying to do this. We're trying to do this cheaply. Anyone can do this in a TV studio, can't they?
Yeah.
And I think we're trying to do this in a way that more people, because in terms of how you can, how many people can use a particular technology. You've got the very top pyramid with like the national broadcasters, the local broadcasters. You've got rich production companies, and then smaller production companies, and then you've got everyone else. By the time you get to the bottom of that shallow pyramid, you've got maybe thousands of times more people that can do it, and that's what we want to encourage. Which is, by all means, buy the expensive stuff because it is good and there are very good reasons for buying it. But if you can't, there are still ways you can do things.
I think it's appropriate technology. I think we needed to throw some light on. What was available.
Yeah.
Budget-wise, we're using we're using 3 small mirrorless cameras. There's a pretty lightweight setup in terms of kit.
What you can do for, I haven't added it all up, but what you can do for this amount, you probably would have paid 100 times more 15 years ago.
Yeah, if we look at how technology has been commoditized to what we're doing now, live streaming to people's phones.
All around the world.
Yeah.
So, okay, well look, we've gone well over time, but I think for good reasons. I just want to say thank you again to Matrox. Fantastic that you've got behind this. We'll be doing it again in 2 weeks. Watch our social media for exactly when. We'll aim for similar times, but it's not always possible. Do give us your feedback. Really like to see it. And if you're watching this as a download, well, thanks very much. And we'll see you soon. Bye.